our school committee is called to order. The first item on our agenda is an executive session to discuss collective bargaining or litigation. The committee will be returning into open session following the executive session. So we do need a roll call vote to enter into executive session. So a motion to convene in executive session. So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Zito.
Yes.
Mrs. Singer.
Yes.
Mr. Larson.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy, yes. Mrs. Scales.
Yes.
Mr. Tyler.
Yes.
Mr. Withers.
Yes.
Mrs. Sawyer.
Yes.
Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
And again, the committee will convene in public session in approximately 45 minutes. meeting of the Attleboro School Committee is called to order. This time I ask you please rise and join the committee in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please note that this meeting is being electronically recorded. Our first item on our agenda tonight, and I would also like to extend the committee's gratitude to everyone in the audience for waiting out our executive session. We try to keep the meeting start time to 7 o'clock whenever possible. Unfortunately, tonight wasn't one of those nights. The Rebecca Lynn Whitefield Foundation is an organization that the Attleboro schools and the Attleboro community has benefited from immensely over the course of the past 5 years. And we have a number of representatives from the Whitefield Foundation here tonight, and I'd ask them to please come up, join the committee at the table, and discuss the presentation that you'll be making tonight. And if you could identify, I know most of you, but if you could identify yourselves for the committee as well.
Right here, Dave?
Anywhere you like, Mr. Parsons.
Drop the mister.
How about just Parsons?
That's usually what people call me.
I'm the check holder in case you didn't know.
There you go.
This is just a small representation of our board. We have a very, very large board. We've raised over $250,000, and we've given over $200,000 back to the greater Attleboro community. So we're about giving back. The majority of us that are on the board don't even have children anymore in the school system. They're all grown and trying to make them leave, but they won't leave. So we do this out of the love that we had for Rebecca. So Mr. Whitefield did write a little thing, and I'd like to please accept this $2,400 in donation to the Attleboro school system on behalf of the Rebecca Lynn Whitefield Foundation, to be distributed in $300 increments among the eight middle and elementary schools. These donations are meant for the procurement of additional books to be displayed in Becky's Corner section of the respected schools. We started this a while ago, and right now we're up to $12,300 that we have given in books to the schools. People that know Becky, she loved to read, loved to read, and loved to be read too. And for this reason, this is why this is one of our key things that we like to give back. And she was a student at Hyman Fine and then went on to Wamsutta. And this is a small token of our appreciation for you guys letting us do this, get the word out. So.
And it's a fitting tribute, and I think for those of us who knew Rebecca and are familiar with the Whitefield Foundation, you know, the impact the foundation has had on the school system and the individual schools really exceeds the monetary one. And the committee is obviously grateful to each of you for the commitment that you've made and to helping to grow the foundation and to grow its impact. And certainly the students of the Attleboro schools are better off in the community as a whole. Anyone else on the committee like to add any comments? I know we're advertising tonight as well, the Blue Pride Ball, which I know many committee's members have been regular attendees at. It is always a good night with a lot of community spirit.
It is our only fundraiser, so it's very important. We used to do a mini golf, and we've stopped that. As both Mike and I get out of the school system from coaching, this is our only, so this is a very important one. And it's usually, we had over 500 people last year. Mm-hmm. And it's been a sellout every single year.
Excellent raffle items, excellent auction items. So certainly, if you don't have any plans on April 12th, it's a good one. It's a good thing to make an appointment for. And if you do have plans, we recommend that you change them. So, any other comments? I think if you could present the check to the superintendent, I think that would be appropriate. And
can we bring up some of the library?
By all means.
Please, I mean,
Please,
that's who it's really, you can touch it, but it's really for them.
that's even better.
I'll give you the real one.
I think I'm home with my wife again.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And it's for these lovely ladies that showed up. It's the money to be well used.
We've got our Attleboro paparazzi making his way over there, so.
says here. Terrific. Ready? Next.
You can touch it.
Very much.
And then also, the committee would like to present a token of our appreciation. Ms. Singer's going to read that.
Thanks. This is a certificate of commendation. The Attleboro School Committee extends its sincerest gratitude to the Rebecca Lynn Whitefield Foundation for the tireless efforts on behalf of the children and young adults of the Attleboro community, with particular appreciation for the Becky's Corner initiative in each of the middle and elementary school libraries. The governing body of the Attleboro school system commends the RLW Foundation for supporting the students of Attleboro and making Attleboro a stronger and more vibrant community.
I guarantee you this will go in Becky's house tonight, and it will be framed and put in Mike's office.
There you go. I know for board members, there is a Whitefield Foundation meeting that was scheduled to begin at 7, and so if you leave now, you should be able to get there right from the beginning.
You won't tell him, will you?
And please give our best to Mr. Whitefield and the rest of the
We'll be
group.
back probably next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. She's nice, huh? She's a high school senior? Volleyball player? Yeah. They always stand up.
Historically, the school committee has had a presentation at each meeting called the Community Update, in which our student representative has shared with each of our building communities some of the things that are going on in and around the Attleboro schools. With this new committee taking office, the Community Update has evolved a little, the rationale being that a lot of the events that we've been publicizing are promoted extensively in the building communities in which are actually affected. And so, as I said to the committee during our orientation process, around Attleboro spotlight events, I think it's fair to say that this is a work in progress as to exactly which shape this is going to take place. And to speak to the degree to which this is a work in progress, our two student representatives, Mr. Lancaster and Mr. Clark, are currently doing battle on the basketball court and track, respectively. And therefore, the vice president of the Attleboro High School Student Government, Tim Cow, has graciously agreed to step in as our acting student representative, and he's going to be sharing the events that the students chose to highlight as part of the showcase event. So, Mr. Cow?
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. The first spotlight event that they wanted me to talk about was the Brennan Middle School Winter Festival. It will be held next Tuesday, January 28th from 6:30 to 7:30. The goal of this festival is to provide opportunities for the teachers, students, and parents to experience a variety of learning activities in all subject areas, which all have a common theme of winter. How it will be run is that teachers will plan the activities in their respective subjects, and students will facilitate the hands-on activities and explain the connection to the curriculum standards in that subject. As an incentive, students attending will receive a homework pass and are entering into the drawing for 3 raffle prizes. Also, the Brennan PTO will provide hot chocolate and cookies, and will have a table set up to sell Brennan Spiritware. Last year, there were 218 students and 419 guests that were in attendance. We are hoping that we can spread the word around and make sure that it is well attended once again this year.
Thank you.
No problem. Next up, we have the kindergarten information sessions. It is an event for Attleboro residents and families who have returning and new kindergarteners. It will be held 2 weeks from now, Wednesday, February 5th at 6 o'clock at all of our elementary schools. At the presentation, families will be able to make an appointment to register their children to kindergarten. It will basically provide an overview of kindergarten curriculum, special education, English language learner services, and the parents will be able to tour a kindergarten classroom. There will also be a nurse available to answer medical and health questions. An advocates representative will be available to discuss that and answer any questions parents might have. and there will also be staff on hand to answer any registration questions parents might have. That'll just wrap it up.
Thank you, Mr. Cow. Any questions from the committee members with regard to the two spotlight events that Mr. Lancaster and Mr. Clark chose and then promptly designated Mr. Cow to share information about? You're good. And does the administration have anything to add with regard particularly to the kindergarten orientation program?
No, but only one thing is that now that we have full-day kindergarten in all of our schools, there's no lottery system. So in fact, I encourage all the parents to attend this informational meeting. We will have representatives there in every one of the schools to answer any questions that parents may have for the first time that they're enrolling their children. I know that's an unnerving situation, having your 5-year-olds come into schools for the first time. I remember way back when. So we really want to make this experience and this transition from home to school a very positive one. And there's the first start on that evening.
Important points and an important night. And each building website, as indicated on the slide there, does have additional information with regard to these and other events. But particularly if you have a child entering kindergarten February 5th, is certainly a night to mark on your calendar. And as part of the evolving concept of spotlight events, eventually the events chosen by the Student Advisory Council will be on the school committee page as well. So if you only caught half of the discussion, you can pick it up, more information there. So thank you, Mr. Kyle, and if you see Mr. Clark and Mr. Lancaster around, please offer them our gratitude for giving you that assignment. Next up is the approval of minutes. These minutes are from the Attleboro School Committee organizational meeting and subsequent orientation sessions. So a motion to approve the school committee minutes for the following meetings: January 7th, 2014, January 9th, 2014, January 11th, 2014, and January 13th, 2014.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those minutes are approved. Moving on to the consent agenda. First off, the motion to accept the $2,400 donation that we received tonight from the Whitefield Foundation.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. And again, we'll just reiterate our gratitude to the Whitefield Foundation for their ongoing contributions. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,860.14 from La Parade Studio to Brennan Middle School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $374.11 from Target to Brennan Middle School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $500 from Invency to Brennan Middle School's gift donation line.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation of 39 used books from an estimated total of, with an estimated amount of $147.26 from Mary Thake to Brennan Middle School Library.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
And I should just point out that I'm not making an arbitrary determination as to what warrants a discussion. This is just my first time doing the consent agenda, so I apologize for any inconsistency. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,866.70 from La Parade Studio to Wamsutta Middle School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,711.78 from La Parade Studio to Thatcher Elementary School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $2,008.30 from La Parade Studio to Hill Roberts Elementary School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $746 from Chestnut Hill Studio to Hyman Fine Elementary School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,262.67 from La Parade Studio to Willa Elementary School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $5,000 from the Alan Sean Feinstein Bank of America Matching Gifts Foundation to Studley Elementary School Gifts Donation Line.
So moved. Second.
Discussion.
This is just a great ongoing collaboration that Studley has with this foundation, and it's amazing what they've been able to do.
Agreed. And I think for those who aren't familiar with it, a briefing at some point to the committee with regard to the benefits that the district has enjoyed because of the partnership with the Feinstein Foundation would be appropriate. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $2,000 from Alan Sean Feinstein Foundation to the Studley Gifts donation line.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to declare 10 antiquated projectors to the Willa Elementary School as surplus as they are no longer utilized and they are antiquated.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve a field trip proposal for 22 Attleboro High School grade 9 through 12 students to the National High School Cheerleading Championship in Orlando, Florida from March 28th through March 31st, funded by parents and fundraisers.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Just that we wish them well. They represent the district very well in Florida every year. I believe this is taking place in 2014. If the cheerleaders have a time machine, then we'd like to know about it, but we think it's 2014. All in favor?
Aye.
And a motion to commend Mr. Tyler for doing that much better than me at each and every meeting of the last 2 years. I'll withdraw that motion, but no. The next item on the agenda is the open forum portion of the meeting. The statement to be read by the chairperson is as follows. This is a time when members of the public may address the school committee. Open forum is not a time for committee members to engage in dialogue with members of the public. Guidelines for open forum are available to you. Please know that we are interested in what you have to say, but we cannot respond with background information on your issue. And please come forward to the podium and state your name and address. Anyone wishing to address the committee? Representative Perot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your thank you with me. Just going to inform the committee of two different items that might be of interest. The first one is just a little update on the internet infrastructure bond bill that I worked on last year. And that right now is passed out of the House Committee on Bonds and also passed out of the House itself. So now it's in the Senate Bond Committee. And what that is it's allocating about $38 million, or it's authorizing, I should say, $38 million to about 600 schools throughout the Commonwealth for internet upgrades in terms of infrastructure, just the wiring and Wi-Fi. And Attleboro, and I've met with Superintendent Sheehan, he said that I think it's $1.3 million is what Attleboro needs to get
We're
park
looking
ready.
to do an RFP with regard to that, so we'll see what that amounts to. But right now, one of the bids is 1.3 million.
Okay, so if we were to take that bid for, to get park ready, it would be, a match of about 55% from the state, and then there's around 25% from the federal government, so it would, be just over $700,000 coming from the state with a small match from the Fed, and it just basically eases the burden. So that is still alive, and the next step is that I've already locked up support with the Senate, Senate Bond Committee Chair. He supports the measure, and so he's going to push it through. And then it just has to get through the entire Senate. That's when it's, it's in really good shape. After that, then the governor just has to basically spend the money. So the House and Senate authorize it, the governor appropriates it. So I know that there's projects are pending, and what basically you guys are going to have to do with City Council is just determine whether or not you want to wait for the money to be handed to you, with the small gamble that the governor may not actually appropriate the money, or do you want to just go ahead and use city funds for that? So that's the first issue. Do you have any questions about that?
I do. When do you think is the length of time prior to submission of that grant proposal? When will if it gets out of the Senate and so forth, when will we have the opportunity to apply for that grant money?
That would have to be set up. I don't know is a short answer, but it's once it gets out of the Senate, then it goes to the governor for signing, because it's part of a larger, it's like a $900 million IT bond bill, and I just got a $38 million line item added to it, which would cover 600 schools. So the governor would then have to, he has sole decision making as to whether or not he wants to spend the money. We've authorized it, he would then spend it. The timeline is something that DESE in Mitchell Chester would set up, Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. So that is, I don't know, that's out of my purview.
Representative, do you feel that this will, that they're earmarking an expediency of these funds because of PARC and because of the need of the schools to increase their infrastructure
Yeah,
with
yeah.
regard to technology?
Yep, yeah, because there's approximately 600 schools throughout the Commonwealth that are not park ready, and you know, it's sort of, it's technically not an unfunded mandate, and I'm not supposed to call it that, but it sort of is, because there is, in theory, a paper and pencil version of PARC, which is what Ways and Means use to determine that. It's not unfunded, but it's meant to be done online, the PARC test. And so with 600 schools not having the adequate internet infrastructure, and that's not even including the computers, in the classrooms, there was a pretty good amount of momentum for this within the House, I was able to line up a lot of support for it. So yeah, the PARC test was sort of the thing that got a lot of people motivated to do this, but then, when you upgrade your internet infrastructures, you can use that for any other number of things.
Do you think that this funding will be available for the early part of this fiscal year, July 1?
I doubt it. I don't think it'll be available that soon. That's just my guess. It could be. Right now it's in the Senate bond, like I said before, the Senate bond committee has to get the entire bill out of committee, and then the entire Senate has to vote on it, which I'm like 99% sure it's going to come out of bond committee in the Senate and then also get authorized by the Senate, and then it goes over to the governor to determine whether or not to spend. Is that going to happen by July 1st? I don't know. I would hope so. I'll let you know. Mitchell Chester certainly wants it too, and he's got the ear of the governor, as does Secretary Malone, and Malone, did I get his name again?
And the
Secretary of
super-
Education.
Yeah, yeah.
And the superintendent organization has the ear of
Yep.
Mr. Chester.
Yeah, and superintendent organization, the school committee organization, the AFT, and the MTA all support this. That's why I was able to, get that much money out of bond committee so quickly. So that's the first issue. Any other questions about that? If anything changes, I'll come and let you guys know immediately. The second issue is what's called House 59, H59, and this is a healthcare retirement pension bill, and this concerns every public employee in the state, teachers, librarians, elected officials. At present, if my memory serves me right, there is an 80% match from the state after 10 years of public service for the health care pension benefit. House 59 would change that drastically. House 59, and I've gotten a couple emails from teachers, that's why I'm bringing it to your attention, because it affects every public employee. But House 59 would change the retirement system so that you only not get 80%, you get 50% after 20 years of service. So you have to double your service to get 30% less. There's one class of people who's an exemption, and those are folks who have 20 years at present and were planning on retiring within 5 years. And so those are the folks who are exempt from this. So if you have somebody who has been, who's 60 years old, and they've got 10 and a half years in, they were planning on 80% subsidy, it goes down to 50. And then they still have to work longer as well. They'd have to work, several more years. This is being proposed by the governor. This is something, like I said, is going to affect every single public employee in the state. It also changes another little change to the retirement is general employees they wouldn't be able to retire until 60, so it's up 5 years, I believe. Hazmat, 55, and hazmat sector folks, and then public safety at 50. So the age of when you can retire also changes. So it's really, it's a cost savings bill, but there's opposition from both Republicans and Democrats to this. There's also some folks who really support it. The bill is in limbo right now because it's still in committee, and the details of the bill might change. We might say, okay, maybe 20 years, and you'll still get your 80%. But I just wanted to make folks aware of that because the teachers, and the librarians, and any other public official who has a interest in a pension, healthcare benefit pension, would stand to negatively be affected. So,
Sure, and we appreciate the information and the communication, Representative Perot. And as there becomes information that you think the committee or the school district needs to know, I would just encourage you to please communicate with the superintendent. And I know that he'll keep the committee informed as well. So thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to address the committee during open forum? Okay. And that will conclude open forum, and we will move on to our new business agenda. At this time, I'd ask Mr. Parento and Mr. Rose to join the committee. In a moment, I don't know if the superintendent wanted to introduce this topic, but we'll be talking tonight about some specific issues and some general issues, all of which are very much connected and could be put under the heading of the challenges facing the district with regard to the physical condition of our flagship Attleboro High School. And again, we're going to make our way around a few different points that need to be discussed tonight with Mr. Rose, Mr. Parento, and the administration. I'd encourage committee members to ask questions, but the starting point, as is too often the case, I think, is pressing challenges that has taken on a sense of urgency in recent weeks, which is the William F. Dench Natatorium. So, Mr. Sheen.
Members of the committee, I'll be very brief with regard to this topic, but as you may or may not know, and the community certainly knows, that the natatorium located at the high school has been under rehabilitation and repair since the fall of last year. When we found out that we had drain problems and we had filtration problems, in fact, that the pool had to be closed down and we had to empty the pool and start looking at this, and you know those pieces. What my comment is to the public at large and to you is that my feeling is, based on information I get from the experts associated with this, that this is not something that we can put off for an extended period of time. Having a pool without water is not a healthy condition, especially coming into the springtime with hydraulic pressures and rising water tables, etc. At the same time, we have a large amount of students and other outside groups that utilize that pool extensively and have been unable to do that. So a piece of the community is missing right now, and that's unfortunate, but we know that we may not be able to do this overnight, but my point to the committee is that as fast as we possibly can do this, it may be a pay me now or pay me greater later on, especially when we have the construction company currently there. I don't want to see that company leave and then wait for a period of time and then us get them back when they may not be available at our leisure. So I'll leave it at that point, and I'll turn it over at this time to Mr. Rose.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Sheen. Mr. Rose, if I could just say, I know that you have briefed the committee during our orientation sessions as part of your general briefings. The superintendent has communicated regularly. We are generally familiar with this issue, but if you could take a step back and refresh us on sort of the history of this issue, what the previous committee authorized, and sort of as that as a starting point, and then
Sure.
we will move from there.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. 3 quick things. Number 1, there are 2 things that we need to fix with the pool: the filtration system and the main drain. Decision was made, let's fix the main drain first. We'll try to fix the filtration system second, or sometime at the end of FY14 or at the beginning of FY15. With that in mind, Jason and his staff did a terrific job of developing a request for proposal to replace the main drain. 2 bids came in. New England Aquatics won the bid. And at the September 23rd school committee meeting, New England Aquatics was awarded. The only wrinkle is when we contacted New England Aquatics, they said, thanks very much, and we'd love to follow through with the work, but we're really tied up right now. And we won't be able to get there until maybe the 3rd week in November. Fine, thank you. We'd like you to come as soon as you possibly can, and they arrived in the 3rd week in November. At that point, they started the work, and now let me transition to Jason.
Thanks.
It was actually, just to sort of back up even before that, it was Jeff Brousseau, the school department's maintenance supervisor, who worked with an engineer to go ahead and establish the request for proposal for the repairs and really take a look at phasing the project. The reason that we chose the main drain before the filter system, and it may almost seem as though, why wouldn't you go with the filter system first, is because the filter system is operating properly. The main drain had actually calcified so much that it wasn't allowing enough water through the filtration system, through the pool. So our CPO, Noel Givens, was having a hard time really just keeping chlorine levels where they needed to be depending on the usage of the pool. So that's where the challenges came from. Jeff went out, worked with an engineer, developed an RFP, and New England Aquatics was identified as the lowest qualified bidder. They started, I believe it was just the week of Thanksgiving, around November 22nd, 25th, 26th. Came back and really got going. This is a great indicator of the type of work these guys are doing. The numbers are obviously quite large, 76,000 to start, all the other numbers we're talking about. But as you can see, everything taken out of that pit is being done by hand. So there's an immense amount of labor involved in actually doing this work. Beyond that, Judy, do you have any,
I have the remote up here, Jason, which is probably not ideal.
I just wanted to actually show a
these-
close-up of,
Any of,
that's a
Okay.
great shot. That's the actual hole.
it depends
that-
on your perspective, I think.
Yeah, okay. Maybe not so great. New England Aquatics, that's the area that they opened up and removed that section of the main drain. What became problematic almost instantly was groundwater. And there's actually another photo, Mr. Chair, if you could scroll through, that really shows.
No, I don't know if there's one on this presentation. We have this and this.
Okay. Well,
Any
in
of those
that,
make the point?
that pit, actually, it'll do great.
Okay.
That pit right now, you see all those lines coming out of it, and there you can see them heading toward the exit. It's actively pumping water, gallons of water by the minute. That hole is filling with water by the second. If those pumps, for whatever reason, we were to stop them or they failed, we'd fill the pool with water. It took them a couple of weeks just to empty the pool. So the challenge and the intensity of the labor all became about groundwater, which brings us to some of the challenges that we've had moving forward. Now, the spec that our engineer laid out for us was replacing the portion of the main drain that you see exposed, and then adding a liner from inside the filter room that would coat the existing 8-inch drain. They would inflate that, it would reinforce the, they would clean that out first, excuse me. They would inflate that liner, and then it would basically hold and allow enough water to cycle through the filter system without having to replace that. Replacing that would have mean literally demoing much more of that. That part of that deck would be gone, we'd be much further in, and the cost would probably be quadrupled, if not more. So we thought it was a good solution. We're kind of doing two things here. We're replacing the bad section of it, but we're also going to line and save what we could. If you could shoot to that picture that just shows the exposed pipe. Now that is at pool level. So from the pool, if you were to enter the natatorium, you'd go down a set of stairs. There's a door on your right-hand side. You go down a dozen or so steps. You go to the back of that room, and that's what you would come across. That section is not accommodating the sleeve. Our engineer thought, our contractor were very confident that they could sleeve that entire area, so they would insert it and it would go this way to the exposed area that you see in the pool, and then we would replace the remainder of it. The problem now is that that line is not as strong as we thought it was. Problem is as they emptied it out, cleaned it out, it's pitting, and it's allowing water to spray inside of it. So we're not able to actually insert the sleeve. So now we have to go down further and remove that 90-degree angle. And again, it's all about labor. So that's sort of how we get to where we are right now. Does anyone have any questions? I know I kind of threw a lot out there.
And it's a complicated topic, and as you usually do, you've done a great job of explaining it to us as best you can. Are there questions from the committee about?
Well, you said that gets us to where we are now, but I don't think we've talked about where we are now. What do we need to do? I know that, there's money that we need to spend in repairs that we need to be made, but what is it specifically that needs to be done?
That portion and the 90-degree turn that allows it to enter the pool has to be replaced. So we can't utilize the, we were sort of using a hybrid of replacing part of the drain and then using the sleeve to support what was remaining. That 90-degree angle is so damaged that we're not able to do that. So we have to, again, now we've got to excavate everything else to reach down to that. And we're looking at potentially another 18 inches of concrete.
And what
which
is the
what we found.
approximate price, Jason, to do this? Do we have an estimate?
There are two estimates associated with it. The actual work itself is somewhere, and I don't have the number in front of me, somewhere around $26,000 or $27,000. The dewatering cost, which is the big one, is not bigger than that, but dewatering is close to $15,000 on this particular piece of the project. Dewatering has been a huge issue, and that's just keeping water out of the holes while these guys are inside working in them. And it's been a big, big challenge thus far, and it continues to be. If we were down there now, you would hear 3 or 4 pumps just cycling and pushing tons of water outside through the drains. So that becomes the challenge.
And as I understand it, and based on the previous briefings, though that cost that you just identified, the dewatering and the issue that you ran into, is on top of an additional cost that is part of the potential change order. Is that accurate? Could you?
That is accurate. There's a couple of other items, and unfortunately, I didn't bring the photos with me. But
No, well, you sent them to the chairman, and he didn't put the right ones in the presentation, Mr. Parenta. So
no problem. So they're actually on this wall where you see the 3 foot 6 inch mark, and there's actually one there and one closer to the left. You'll see 2 little rust spots behind the tile. What that means is that water has penetrated behind the tile and gotten into the concrete, and that's actually the rebar that's rusting. So they'll need to remove that portion, and really I think it's 2 or 3 2x2 sections that they'll have to remove that concrete, address the rebar, and then reconcrete that and retile it. After that, the recommendation is, of course, while the pool is empty, let's go ahead and regrout and do some caulking around the upper ledge. And that's the additional cost, which is approximately, kind of makes up that delta around $26,000, $27,000.
okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Withers.
Was there anything that we could have or should have been doing previously to prevent or at least alleviate some of these costs? And I guess the more important question is, assuming we go forward at some point with this, is there anything we can do to prevent a relatively huge expense coming out of the blue?
Well, I think when you take a look at this particular problem, it's really just about age and calcification and on those drain lines. And I think when you start looking at 30, 40, 50 years of handling that volume of water, that highly treated, that volume of water on a regular basis, it's just a natural, really situation that you're going to end up with that calcification. I think lining the tube helps extend the life of what's already existing, but I think, I'd love to see this still here in 30 or 40 years, we would be looking at a similar issue. It's one of those things, it may not be a fair comparison, but it might be like saying, could we have done anything to save the roof beyond 30 or 40 years? Probably not. It's just at some point the natural life expectancy is met and then surpassed, and it's time to make some aggressive moves similar to this.
Thank you, and excellent question. Mr. Larson and I had the pleasure of touring the facility with Mr. Parento, Mr. Rose, and Mr. Broussard a week or two ago, and I think Mr. Larson, more eloquent than I, can describe a little bit both what we saw and the potential risks, as Mr. Larson relayed them to the committee during the orientation, about the suspension of work. You want to expand upon that?
Can we go back to the picture of just the pipe coming out again? Again, like Tom and Jason mentioned, you have to imagine this pipe is coming out of your basement. The room that's in is actually underneath the floor of the pool deck. So you're somewhere in the 10 to 12 feet below grade of the pool deck there. While we were on that tour, we did a rough measurement, and that pipe, from the top of that pipe that you see, goes down approximately 5 feet, we estimated, when we were down there, to the elbow. So when you think about digging a hole in your basement, and this is kind of how you have to think of it, you've got to dig a hole through your basement floor. You've got to dig a hole big enough that you can get a man down the side of that pipe, 5 feet down, and he can bring a tool down there to cut an 8-inch pipe, and he'll be standing in water because he'll be in the water table at that point, so you'll be pumping water the whole time that you're working this pipe. All the concrete to cut through the floor and all of the 5 feet of dirt that you're going to go through, the 4 feet of dirt that you're going to go through, is all going to be hand bucketed out of your basement in 5-gallon buckets. I would dare say at a minimum you're looking at cutting a hole 4 foot square, 3 by 4 next to that pipe and going down 5 feet, securing that hole, and you're doing all of this with hand tools. There's no way to get hydraulic equipment down there. There's no way to get boring equipment down there properly. And, you know, I think if you go downstairs and you look at it, and it becomes very apparent that this is just going to be a long, wonderful job for somebody. But there's also really no way around it. There is no outside access that you could get digging equipment down there. So,
Very tight.
Any other questions or comments with regard to the substance of the problem that we're facing in the pool? Okay. So the next question, obviously, is what are we going to do about this? I think it was the hope of members of the committee coming into tonight's meeting that we may be able to responsibly make an appropriation that would allow for this work to be completed. And at some point, that might still be the case. And I wanted to just very briefly outline 3 potential scenarios under which this work could be done. And I think, because I think one of the questions that I know committee members have had, and questions that I would imagine community members have, is isn't this the type of project that would be classified as a capital improvement, and therefore essentially, you know, be spearheaded and eventually paid for by the municipal government? And I think what I would say to that is that there are maintenance issues with school facilities, and there are capital improvement issues. Maintenance is something that is generally covered under the school budget, and capital improvements are generally not. This is one of those issues that I think, you know, you could potentially make the argument that it is either a maintenance or a capital improvements project. I think a more compelling argument can be made that it is a capital improvement project. Unfortunately, the capital improvements process is not one in which just because a problem has risen to the level of a big problem, you can jump to the head of the line. And so at some point in the past, it may have been advantageous to advocate for, and this was listed as on the capital improvements project, but perhaps it would have been better to advocate and prioritize it in a way where we didn't find ourselves in this situation. But you know, that's a hindsight is 20/20 situation, and I don't think that's one that the reality is now, if we were to go back to square one and do that now, we'd be talking about a very significant period of time elapsing before the pool reopens. And I think for the points that Mr. Sheehan articulated earlier, that's a tough sell. So the other 2 options are to appropriate the money now, or run the types of risks that have been identified by multiple members tonight about, you know, waiting to the next fiscal year. And the one thing I would say about that is this school committee is not going to feel any better about spending whatever amount we need to spend next fiscal year than we do this year. There are plenty of things we'd rather spend money on. Okay. The next part of this, however, is the city solicitor has raised concerns with regard to the legal implications of continuing a project of this magnitude without a public bidding process. I think, frankly, we don't have all the answers that we need with regard if we were to move forward at this point. And so rather than offer a motion to appropriate the funding, I am prepared to offer a motion that merely instructs the administration to confer with our legal advisors to determine all of the financial and legal implications come back to the committee with an informed opinion as to all of the again, legal implications, and then we'll move forward. And that may be making an appropriation to complete the work. It may be a bidding process, but I think that's a determination that needs to be made prior to any committee action or appropriation. Does anyone want to comment on that, or any questions with regard to that? It is not, when we received our briefings during the orientation, that was not the direction that we were going, but as I said, we had a variable change.
I do have one question.
Mr. Storrs?
Obviously, we want to try to handle this as soon as possible. So under an ideal circumstance, when it comes to, if we had to go out for an RFP, what's the shortest amount of time frame that would be believable?
Mind if I take a stab at it?
You're certainly better qualified to answer it.
In all-
than me.
Puts himself on the hook for a time.
And thank you, Mr. Storrs. The bottom line is it would probably take us at least a week, maybe two, to develop the RFP, and then approximately 2 weeks for the advertisement, making sure it gets in the public register and so on. So bottom line, 1 month would probably allow all the interested bidders 2 weeks to respond, and then with award. So now we're looking at maybe 6 weeks to the award date, or to, I say the award, 6 weeks until the day the bids are due, and then after that, Finance Committee, School Committee, in all likelihood, approximately 2 months until we award the work, whatever work that might be, to the new vendor.
Which is unfortunate, I think, and an excellent question and an unfortunate response. The one piece I would add is that this committee and the subcommittees need 48 hours notice to convene to take action. The previous chairman convened the committee on very short notice to get this project started, and I'll convene the committee as necessary to expedite the process. So this may be an issue of members coming in for a very short meeting. Probably won't be the last time over the course of these 2 years where that happens. But I would imagine a scenario under which we don't wait for our next regular meeting to move forward. Mr. Withers?
Have we got any indication how long it'll be until we get a final or formal decision as to whether or not we really do need to go out to an RFP, or if we can just move forward with it?
I think that'll be in a matter of day.
A day.
That's my expectation. Mrs. Storrs?
Now, I know that a motion is forthcoming, which I think is understandable, but would it be in the interest of the situation to include in the motion the possibility that if the determination is an RFP is needed, that we give direction at this time to go forward with that in the process of saving time?
I'm not, I think that this motion is to be broad enough where they will be prepared to do that. So I think the answer to your question is yes. The motion that I would construe this motion as encompassing that authority. I would want to review some of our policies to make sure that there aren't any specific policies that speak to a public bidding process, which may require more explicit action. But I would say that if that is the case, whatever body needs to be convened in order to move forward on this will be convened. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so I'm going to offer a motion to instruct the administration to confer with the city solicitor and committee attorney on all financial and legal ramifications with regard to the completion of the ongoing pool repairs and take necessary action.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Mr. Withers?
Take all necessary action, meaning?
Put it out to bid if unless we have a policy saying that we need a finance subcommittee vote that requires it. And I will confer with both Mr. Sheehan and Mr. Rose in the coming days to then communicate to the committee what exactly. Do not construe it to mean close the pool forever. That's not necessary action. Mr. Sheehan?
As part of your motion, are you also stating that if in fact we do not have to go to bid and it plays in our favor, that we have the go-ahead to proceed with the rehabilitation of the pool as outlined in our previous meetings?
I think in order to move forward, we will need an appropriation vote, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think that would be, I think that will, I mean, in all likelihood, we're gonna be coming in for a short meeting.
And we'll have specific numbers for you
Absolutely.
at that time, okay.
Yes.
And that was really the gist of my question,
Okay.
of making sure it wasn't authorizing them to go forward if we don't have to go for an RFP,
Mhm.
you know, to find out what would be appropriating and vote at that time.
Yeah, I think the appropriation of funding,
Right.
I would think would require a specific vote. Mrs. Scales?
Do you just want to put a timeline as far as them getting back to us and doing this?
Yes, but I don't know that we need to include it in the motion, but I think that everyone understands the urgency and that will be an issue that we will be taking up in the next 48 hours. Mr. Larson?
I think we all just have to keep in the back of our mind, if we do end up going down the road of the RFP, we're not only gonna have the 2 months from tonight that somebody would start the work back up, but 2 months from now, the potential contractors are gonna be in full swing of their spring work. It's not unrealistic that just because we're gonna be ready to go in 2 months, that the potential bidder will be ready to go in 2 months. So there could be a huge gap of time, and this is really gonna mess this project up. And
If it doesn't, yeah.
if we have to go down the road that I think we're gonna end up having to go down, I think we all need to be thinking about the fact that 2 months from tonight, nothing's gonna happen. This could go on for months in this situation, depending on who the contractor is and what else that contractor is doing and where their crews are and where we get in line, and this could be a serious setback.
Mr. Storrs?
If it turns out we don't need the RFP, and we have New England Aquatics move forward as, I guess, a secondary repair to the original project, when would they be able to start on that? When do we believe, if it was allocated and voted on by the committee, when would they be able to start that fix?
They're waiting for a word from us. They are prepared to start quite soon.
So would it be beneficial to either amend the motion or have a second motion with that contingency? So that way if the committee wants to, we could actually allocate the funding now if it is determined that the RFP is not needed for New England Aquatics.
I understand the question, and I think it's a good one. At this time, I would be hesitant to entertain a motion that may be inconsistent with the public bidding law, and to take any committee action that could potentially be construed as this committee not attempting to comply with all of those laws. So until we get a legal determination on that, I think it would be unwise for the committee to move forward. But I would also say that the committee can convene on less than 48 hours' notice if it is deemed an emergency situation. And I would say that given the risks to the infrastructure involved that's been articulated tonight, I would say that this would qualify. Okay. So the motion, again, is for the administration to confer with our legal advisors to make a determination as to all legal and financial implications with regard to the continuation of the work in the William F. Denton Auditorium. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? And the motion is passed. And so we will, Mr. Rose and Mr. Sheehan, if you could consult with both Mr. Mangiarotti and Mr. Lennox tomorrow, we'll receive written legal guidance as to the issue, and we'll circulate that to the committee, and we'll make our determination as to where we go from there. I did want a few other points that I know that we touched upon during the orientation, and I wanted to make clear to the public. There have been a number of comparisons made between this project and the successful reopening of the track and field that the community enjoyed in the fall. And I think that there are some measures that I know the committee already is in the process of considering, or various subcommittees, when they adjourned in the last term, were in the process of considering, that reflect sort of some of the lessons learned through that project. And I just wanted to identify a few of them so the community knows that while, sort of in line with Mr. Withers' question about what could we have done to avoid this, unless that motion was right, we don't have a time machine. But what we do have is action plans going forward in the hope that we can prevent this from happening again. And the first one is our principal partner with regard to use of the pool, the Attleboro Bluefish. We've been in discussions with them for several months with regard to a new agreement spelling out the terms and conditions of their use of the pool. And Mr. Rose and I met with the officials from the Bluefish last week, and they conveyed to me that they would not mind it being made public, that they have agreed in principle to terms and conditions that will be, from a monetary standpoint, more favorable to the district. And so there will be a more revenue coming in from that user of the pool. The contract is still in the process of being finalized, but again, they assured me that it would be okay to make that public. Another sort of shift that was made by the previous finance subcommittee, and I think that it'll benefit the district, is that the agreements with regard to the use of the facilities are being looked at more in a more totality standpoint, from a more totality standpoint. And what I mean by that is, if the agreement gives you use of the pool, it gives you use just of the pool, and not of anywhere else where you can walk from the pool. And how that benefits the district is that if there are tournaments or meets or anything of that nature using the facility, we'll have the ability to rent out other venues within the building. And again, that's more revenue coming in that can be put toward the facility. Another item that's under consideration, or has been in the finance subcommittee, and I anticipate it will be, is consideration of a possible part-time position for an individual who will oversee the maintenance of the pool. That's an issue that obviously the committee will have to take up in the coming months, but the question is, could we potentially save money by having someone who's dedicated to looking after that at all times? And then the two motions that we tossed around a little at the orientation that I wanted to offer tonight, and these are not binding motions that the committee action would necessarily mean, but to refer to the appropriate subcommittees for further consideration, is one, to establish a biennial review of the facility so that future school committees and future administrations will have the benefit of a semi-annual report coming out identifying growing concerns and growing problems. And the other one is the establishment of a separate revolving account specifically for the pool, like we've done with the track and field. And so I'm going to offer a motion to refer to the appropriate subcommittees the passing of a policy that will require a biennial review of the pool, and to initiate the steps necessary to establish a separate revolving account devoted to maintenance of the facility.
Okay.
Okay. Any discussion? Is that because I talked too long explaining it? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay. And so the appropriate subcommittees, the finance and policy subcommittees, when they convene in the coming weeks, will take up these issues, and they'll eventually make their way back up to the full committee. And in the case of the revolving account, that will be moved on to our partners in the municipal government who need to approve those matters. Okay, so that is our pool talk for the night, and we'll be moving on now to a somewhat related issue of the HVAC and window application process, which the previous committee was briefed on, but given the significance of the application, this committee asked for a briefing on that as well. That's the only slide, so if you want pictures of windows, we don't have them.
Yes, the school committee for the last 2 years has submitted an application through the MSBA to replace the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system within the Attleboro High School. And unfortunately, we have not yet been approved. The good news is we're back in the running though. We have until the first week in April to submit the application. It'll be done probably sometime in February. It'll go before the committee for review, and then it'll go to the city council for their review, because when we submit the paperwork to the MSBA wants to make sure that the school committee and the city council approve this application. Essentially, the application is going to be the same as it was last time. Jason, in his thoroughness, has noticed that there's couple of small changes in regard to square footage. The one other change we're gonna make, per the chairman's recommendation, which is a good one, is, Tom, let's show the different dates when we didn't have any power at all at the high school and what the repercussions were, so that we can show to the MSBA, this is an ongoing process, it's an ongoing problem, and we need to get this fixed just as soon as we possibly can. And thanks to Jason and his staff, we have the records indicating when we have lost heat, when we've lost power at the high school. So at some point in February, the committee will be receiving the MSBA application for your approval. From there, it'll go to the city council for their approval, and then we'll send it on to the MSBA in plenty of time, with the hope that we'll get it approved and we'll be able to replace the HVAC system within the high school. Let me stop. Jason, anything to add on?
Yeah, I think Tom covered everything as far as the MSBA application goes. Certainly some of the challenges that we have with the heating and cooling, where we do have cooling here in the high school, are numerous and not unknown. Jeff Russo, again, has really done a yeoman's task of keeping the building heated, and we've had minimal challenges with really segmented heated loss. But we're looking at really two heating plants, hot water and a steam plant. The steam plant is some of the places where we've had most of our challenges. You'll see that we did a major repair over by the music suite. Anywhere where you see new flooring in the building is generally because we've had to do a significant steam repair. And we've had up to 160 feet, 180 feet of steam line that we've had to repair. So Jeff has done a great job of staying on top of that. But what's interesting, and the timing is really great for this conversation, if you were to go down to the music suite right now, you would see new tile, and you would see where that entire steam line was replaced about 10 years ago. You would also notice that there's a handful of brand new tiles that are starting to fold up, and the floor seems extremely warm in that area. It's because we replaced the primary steam, but you can't replace the branches that go under the wall and through the wall into the classroom. And when you shore up a section of steam, it's going to look for the next weakest. It's almost like water. It looks for the next weakest point. It has now found that very close to that suite. So that's another steam leak that coming this summer. That'll be on our radar. We'll move forward and make a repair. It's not causing any detriment to it's not overheating the classroom. It's not affecting the educational process. But from a maintenance standpoint, those are the issues that keep coming up on a regular basis. So we're looking at every summer making significant steam repairs, and then trying to keep the hot water system running, which for the most part has been operating well, but not efficiently at all. We've also got a situation where we've taken very large classrooms and turned them into several small classrooms. Those classrooms are not heated properly. You've got, in cases where rooms are too warm, rooms are too cool, all based on trying to manage heating and cooling, or heating primarily, in several areas that was designed to heat one area. So the heating system in the high school is extremely challenging. The chiller, where we do have air conditioning, and the resource center was, and this is a quote that was given to Jeff just this past fall, maybe we'll get one more season out of it. And that's the chiller for the resource center. Really the only place where we've got significant cooling during the summer months, whether it be summer school, and that's where our computer labs are, obviously sensitive and important equipment there. So I can't stress enough the importance of the heating and cooling piece. And of course, I believe the window system is also involved in that, and it doesn't take much to notice just how poorly our windows have held up. Despite our best efforts, they're single pane. They don't keep the cold out very well. So obviously that's part of the project as well. So that's a great place to start as far as the primary challenge here at the high school. Absolutely.
Any questions with regard to the HVAC or windows process? Is it so fair to say, Mr. Brento, that it's a variable climate at the high school, and that's...
It's a variable climate, and you know, it's funny, in the last few years, we've, Eric Fagerberg, who is the school electrician, has done a lot of work, as you all know. We've taken advantage of a lot of grants through National Grid, and just in the last few years, we've gone ahead, and Eric's worked very closely with them to identify systems that allow us to manage the heating and cooling. So we sort of have a pseudo energy management system on a very old system. So there's communication issues. We're trying to improve efficiency, based on not only keeping people comfortable, but trying to save some energy. And Eric and Jeff and the entire staff has worked very hard at identifying some of those challenges, trying to manage those programs and keep people comfortable and save energy at the same time. The results have been mixed. We've had some very good results from an energy saving standpoint, but there are some challenges because we've got a very new, advanced, and sophisticated system trying to communicate with a very old, not so sophisticated system.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no other, and HVAC window repair is a process that the committee will be hearing about in the near future, as Mr. Rose mentioned. Moving on to our next high school infrastructure issue, I know that Mr. Prento and perhaps Mr. Rose had some information with regard to the Apprentice Cafe, and if just to give some context, does any of our administrators want to just speak briefly to the Apprentice Cafe, the role that it plays in the culinary program and in the career and technical program? Mr. Sawyer, I know you're a high school guy at heart. If you
Well, obviously, it's the venue by which we really showcase a wonderful program that's had a tremendous amount of success over the years. And it's a facility that has not been updated in about 20 years, I believe. So it's time for it to get spiffed up a bit.
Well said. I'm sorry, Mr. Prento, Mr. Rose.
I had an opportunity to sit down with Chef DeShanes last week and Mrs. Edmonds and really talk about some of the needs and what the goal is. And I wouldn't presume to really try to relate what their vision is. But I do know that there are some obvious things that we'd like to get addressed and really put to the front of our restoration or renovation, if you would. The flooring, obviously, is extremely dated. The walls, obviously, that's all wallpaper. It's in, depending on the location, it's in differing conditions. So, we put it back and it'll pop up. So the idea, I believe, at this point would be to sort of what was out in front was do some beautification with the walls and take care of the flooring. Add some more ceramic tile, make sort of a serving area here that goes from that counter space all the way to the main door that you see here in the first photo. So you keep people off the carpeting. Keep that as sort of a grab and go. And then use the carpeted area as the place where the students are going to practice serving and the main dining area. Now, of course, when we take a look at that from a facility standpoint, we sort of look up. And it's hard not to notice in there, and especially when you're sitting in here, the terrible can lighting that's in that room. The lighting in there is terrible. It was great when it was installed maybe 20 years ago, but right now it allows for limited light in the room. There are light spots, there are dark spots, you've got light. You can see actually in that corner, you see where the light is actually shining on the walls, but it's not illuminating the entire room. So what we're proposing to start is put together a ceiling plan, and we're working with Susan's team and her engineering department to put together a ceiling plan. We're going to bring in someone from National Grid at no cost to the school district who's going to come in, take a look at the best lighting for that room, really talk to Chef DeShanes. I believe that he wants to utilize those walls for photographs or paintings of not what is existing now, but of basically the last 50 years of the culinary arts program in Attleboro. So what we're trying to do from the top down is really replacing that ceiling, installing lighting that gives the proper lumens and illuminates the room properly, but also really showcases the photos on the wall, creates a more aesthetic environment. It's very obvious when you go in there that the lighting just seems kind of off in there, and it's really because it's all of that can lighting. From there, obviously, the walls need significant repair and replacement. I believe the idea is to keep the wood decor and move on above that, and then use a combination of heavy-duty carpet tiles and ceramic tiles on the flooring. Now, you've gone that far, of course, and then you can't help but take a look at the serving area. So you've got a very dated countertops that will no longer match what the plan is for the flooring. You've got a serving area where people will come up and pay their check, but I believe the idea is that this is going to be a grab and go. So there might be open top coolers, you grab a pre-made sandwich, pay for it there, and then right along that wall here in the first photo, maybe right under that photo, the idea is to have another area where people who are in the dining room can go ahead and pay there. So really give the students a complete sort of restaurant experience where they're working separate registers, they're working in sort of a faster food type of environment, and then they're in a full service environment. And I believe that's what Chef DeShane's vision is for the room. for us right now, we're working with separate contractors, obviously analyzing what we can do in-house. We would picture doing the ceiling, of course, the lighting with Eric, of being very much involved with that. Our hope would be to take advantage of some potential grant funding that might be out there for the lighting retrofits. If that exists, we really don't know at this point. And then, of course, make sure that we're putting in the proper flooring and really utilizing that space. I am, from a funding standpoint, I certainly couldn't speak to where we are with that, but we would want to make some changes in that primary area there that would allow for that to be more aesthetically pleasing if we're phasing this project in, but also allow you to make some changes without really disrupting the whole area.
Yeah. And I know a lot of that information sounds as though that we're talking about something from an aesthetic standpoint, and to a certain degree that we are, in that we want the building as a whole to be aesthetically pleasing because it reinforces morale, because it shows students our commitment to them and to their education. But as Mr. Sawyer said at the beginning of this discussion, the culinary program is an award-winning program that students in Attleboro High School for a long time, and particularly in recent years, have gone on to have tremendous success with. And this is the epicenter of that program. And unless we are able to give them the facility that is worthy of their talents and of their aspirations to work in that industry, we're creating challenges. So I think that is how discussion of this project began, and it's one that I'm sure the committee will be hearing more about in the near future. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Just one quick.
Mr. Source.
All of the work, is it all going to be done internally?
No. We would unfortunately have to use contractors for a lot of it. And when you're looking at flooring and those types of things, it's a bit simpler. I would envision us doing a good percentage of it. But until we've actually have a plan in place, it would be hard for us to say what we could do best and to really serve the project. But I would expect a collaboration between school department's in-house maintenance staff and contractors.
And the meetings that you referred to with regard to Ms. Edmonds, those meetings are ongoing, and they'll be...
They are. Right now, we are in the process of, Susan's engineering class is putting together sort of a footprint of what they'd like to do. On our end, we're out speaking to contractors and looking at pricing, whether that be ceiling, light fixtures, also looking at lighting in the room, knowing that that's very important.
Okay, Mr. Sheehan?
And also Sue Edmonds is taking a half a dozen field trips to other vocational CTEs and looking at what their cafeterias look like and what their programs are like as well. We've already been to Tri-County as one of them, and we got some ideas.
Great. Any other questions or comments with regard to the Apprentice Cafe?
Is there a
Miss-
timeline on that?
Good question. Is there a timeline on that?
There is not a hard timeline on it just yet, certainly from our perspective. We'd like to get moving right away so that if we were able to identify some opportunity this summer or maybe even during a break, depending on the level of work that we're able to commit to, we'd like to move forward sooner rather than later, just because it's always better to strike when the iron's hot. So I think that would be best. But a hard timeline has not been established.
Okay.
May I
Yes,
just
Mr.
make
Sheehan.
one last, there was a comment as to the funding and so forth. My understanding is that that Mayor Dumas also has an anonymous donation of $5,000 to start this program and renovation of the Apprentice Cafe.
I think Mayor Dumas has received an anonymous donation.
That's right.
Okay.
He's not giving us.
Well, if
He's
he
going to
made
give it
it-
to us. He's received one, and
That's a political
that's
move.
what started.
Makes an anonymous donation.
He, but he's the one who actually started that ball rolling about 2 or 3 months ago.
Yes.
So I think that needed to be mentioned as part of the funding source, not directly from him.
No.
No.
But no, a very important point. And we're grateful to the anonymous donor and to the mayor for recognizing the importance of this program. And then I guess the other point, I don't think it's been made yet, is although this discussion is ongoing, the Apprentice Cafe is open for business and open to the public, I believe from approximately 11 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. When you call and ask, they say it's open for D Block, which helpful only to a segment of the population. But I believe it's Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And obviously, although the wallpaper needs some work, the food is quite good, as some committee members and I have enjoyed just in recent days. So, okay, so tonight we have bounced around from the William F. Denton Auditorium to the windows and HVAC system that go throughout the building. We've mentioned the chiller, which Mr. Larson and I did see on our tour underneath the pool deck. It looked old. I can't speak with much authority on that. And obviously with the culinary program. And so I'm going to offer a motion that I've mentioned in individual conversations to committee members that will essentially ask the administration to form a task force that will look at the infrastructure of our flagship school in its entirety, and to begin a conversation as to exactly what our most pressing challenges and what are our priorities. And as Mrs. Scales and Mr. Withers will give us a recap of the orientation program momentarily, but one of the things that we talked a lot about is the school committee as a forum to begin conversations. And I think that there are many on the committee and in the community that would say that this is a conversation that is long overdue. We do not want future committees to have to, on any given night, have to look at 3 separate projects that all of which have come up for various reasons with various degrees of urgency. This does not discount the degree to which we need to be mindful of our infrastructure throughout the district and all of our elementary, middle schools, and the other buildings that house our programs. But Mr. Parento, I know because we've had many conversations, if you could just talk a little bit about the sort of unique challenge that the high school poses.
Sure. I won't go back into the heating and cooling. I think that creates an entire level of commitment from the department. When you take a look at the department's resources, more than half of the resources go to maintaining the high school. Makes sense. It makes up almost, a third or more than a third of the square footage in the district. But it's important to keep in mind that a lot of that has to do with just maintaining a building this old. Not only do you run into the challenges of trying to keep a place like this heated, the electrical infrastructure has some challenges. The transformers that power this building are original to the building. Those are situations where if we have a transformer fail, there's really no way to recover from that without missing a couple of school days and making that all work. So that is a huge piece for us. The chiller that we discussed earlier, the waste system is original to the building. It's not uncommon to have a challenge with that. The plumbing fixtures as you go through the building, most of those are original to the building. What makes it unique in dealing with those is just a broken flushometer or a sink that leaks or a commode that won't stop running often requires you to turn the water off in the entire building. You come in on a weekend when no one's here, drain the water out of the system, and then make the repair. So the building wasn't built really with maintenance in mind, and probably not with the expectation that we'd be using the same plumbing fixtures 40 years later. So those are some of the unique challenges. From a real world sort of aesthetic challenge that maybe not related necessarily to building infrastructure, but is certainly related to a conducive learning environment, carpeting throughout the entire building needs to be replaced. Original flooring in several sections of the building. The lockers, hard to miss. Many of them are in need of repair, are damaged, rusting. There are all those types of things that really, I think, contribute one way or another to the educational environment. Most of our focus is always on trying to accommodate programs that come into the building. Bringing in a new program to the CTE group often requires a major renovation. The health assisting room most recently, just a few years ago, that was a storage room that required quite an intense restoration. Accommodating the growth of the auto program this past summer required 2 of our guys spent almost the entire summer, and someone from the department had their hands in that building. In that room at any given time during the course of the summer. So what happens is our newer buildings are not getting that attention because the high school requires so much. So from an infrastructure standpoint, everything from repointing the concrete to the window system to the HVAC to an aesthetic standpoint, everything to can we accommodate a half a dozen computers in every room? We can't. We don't have the power in those rooms to do that. When they built this building in the 60s and 70s, it was 1 or 2 outlets. So those are the types of challenges that, we're in a process where we're building computer labs. This past summer, several weeks spent building a secondary computer lab in the resource center. So the building requires a large amount of maintenance just to keep it going and making it an effective learning environment. And every moment that we spend here, obviously, the rest of our facilities, infrastructures are aging as well. Brennan and Wamsutter, 1997. Not as young as they used to be, and requiring more and more effort from our department and from Jeff and Eric and all of those guys to make sure that they're getting in there and keeping them up and running. So the high school creates several unique challenges, not just from an infrastructure. And there are several things I didn't cover: asphalt, concrete repair, sidewalks.
Well, you can be on the task force, you can cover all of it.
There's so much.
I think you
discuss.
encapsulate well. And the only other thing I would add is that, because I know, occasionally we have community members who hear about the condition of the high school and haven't actually had a chance to walk through it. The reality is, because of your staff and the staff at the building level, there are large sections of the building that are very aesthetically pleasing and do induce, a phenomenal culture with regard to learning. And that's, sometimes through sheer effort and sometimes through creative thinking by our educators, but there are portions of the building that any community should and would take pride in. There are other portions more consistent with what you've
One of
just
the
outlined.
things that we had started several years ago is we would pick a portion of the high school and just do a renovation. We would change the ceiling out, put in a new ceiling grid, replace the old 1x1s or go right below them, putting new light fixtures, paint, which even just the painting process takes twice as long because it's all block walls.
Mhm.
So you've got to cut in every single line before you can paint it. There are just several challenges in the high school with keeping it up, but the maintenance team, as I mentioned, Jeff and Eric and Frank and all the guys and Noel really spent a lot of time just kind of segmenting the high school and picking a project
Mhm.
and really just counting on our other buildings to hold on. But we are sort of at that place now where we need to go in and paint Wamsutter, and Brennan needs paint. And if we're here trying to keep this place going, we're not there. So those are some of the
Yep.
unique challenges that it creates for, a very taxed maintenance team.
Sure. With regard to the deadlines of the task force and when they'll report back to the committee, I don't want to get into specifics tonight because I want to confer with the superintendent to make sure that we set up realistic expectations as to when we could hear back, and that would go for both with regard to the composition of the committee as well, but the task force as well. But for now, I'll just make a motion to authorize the formation of the flagship task force to look at all the challenges, priorities that are incorporated into the infrastructure of Attleboro High School. Discussion. Mr. Willis.
I could just make a point. When we're talking about when the task force convenes and discusses the more items that are more aesthetics, like we talk about the carpeting, wallpaper, the lockers, and environment that's conducive to learning. And I don't doubt that for a second. But what I'd like to see is some, if that's really the feeling of the task force, some backup that having these types of updated classrooms and updated lockers and facilities does improve the educational experience, because just today we've gone over the pool, we've gone over the HVAC, major repairs that need to be done in plumbing, electrical, and so on, and I want to be able to support making these aesthetic quote unquote changes, but I think we need to have some backup that it is in fact something that's
Absolutely.
worthwhile.
I think that's an excellent point, Mr. Willis. That the charge is to make the argument to the community that here are the priorities, but they have to be backed up with evidence. And I think that's an excellent point.
I
Mr.
think
Chin.
also, Mr. Withers, that it's not just about that charge, it's also about looking at the flagship in the future, looking 10, 15, 20 years down the road. How are we going to utilize the space in this facility? What are you going to do with your CTE program? How are you going to expand that program? What will that look like? What will that space need to look like? What will your administrative offices need to look like that are housed at this high school? So when we look at this, the committee composition in this task force that's being assigned, it's about a lot of different pieces, not just about the aesthetics. Where is Attleboro High School and where is this district going to be in 10, 15, 20 years? And that is about the infrastructure with regard to the technology piece and some of those other pieces. So it's a monumental task because there's a lot of pieces involved, and every single step of the way, in fact, broaches a topic in another area that has to be flushed out as well. I've had some of those conversations with Chairman Murphy within the last week or so.
Yeah, the interrelatedness of these types of challenges is mind-boggling at times, and to make progress on one front and the ripple effect is something that the committee needs to obviously take into account. What is the totality of circumstances that we're looking at?
And it is a big picture. What is the big picture? What do you want this to look like at the end? How will this appropriately service the needs of the children now and in the future? That's the huge plus in all of this.
Yeah, and I think aesthetics probably isn't the best way to describe it. I think we've used it as, because it's the easiest way to describe it. I mean, really, it's the, learning environment, and just focusing on that and stressing that in the research and the presentation, I think would be helpful in selling it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Any other comments or questions? Because the motion is on the establishment of the task force. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay, so Mr. Sheen will be touching base on that in the near future. Okay. Mr. Rose, Mr. Brento, unless you have anything else? Okay, and I just, very quickly, because we've asked Mr. Brento to come before the committee multiple times to be commended for the hard work of the maintenance staff, and somehow he's always gotten out of it, and his luck ran out tonight. Just say that, Jason, thank you very much for everything you've done, particularly during these months, which I know can be more challenging than others. So, and please pass the committee's gratitude on to your staff as well.
I certainly will. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there are a lot of folks who are doing the yeoman's task in both the maintenance and the custodial department. I mentioned a lot of them today, and there's a lot that I haven't mentioned that are working very hard. So I thank you, and I will pass that on to them as well.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, our next two presentations by our Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Sawyer. Mr. Sawyer, as I said, you're the next two items, both the personnel report and the park implementation update. And I would defer to you as to which order you'd like to go in.
Well then,
Imagining one is shorter than the other, so I don't know which you.
we'll do personnel first. I have a couple items for you tonight on the personnel report. We have 3 retirements. Lisa Hopkins, grade 4 teacher at Willett. Janet Peabody, grade 2 teacher at Studley. And Barbara Senna, the science coordinator at the high school. We have 1 resignation, Beth Peterson, OT at Thatcher. And I also have for you 4 appointments. Joan DeAngelis, Director of Student Services. Karen Pereira, Aspen Projects Manager. Susan Barclay, SPED Insights teacher at Willett. And Patricia McGuire, the paraprofessional librarian at Studley.
Thank you. And so now on to our park implementation update.
So I've been asked to give you an update on the park field test. The district is participating in the park field test this spring. The reasons for the field test I thought were pretty well explained in the memo I quoted for you from the park people themselves back in September. I mean, the state needs to assess whether or not the park assessment is going to be an acceptable assessment of our Massachusetts frameworks. And I think that, that was part of it beforehand, but since then, they've also, the state has passed the Board of Education for the state has passed a 2-year transitional plan in which they will be deciding in the fall of 2015 whether or not to adopt park as the state assessment or not. And part of their decision, their determination will be based on comparing, analyzing the data and comparing what park is doing versus what MCAS already does for us. And I think that having Attleboro students contribute to the data set that the state will be looking at is in the interest of Attleboro students. That how they perform on it is part of what's being considered, that we're not left out of that determination. Other benefits is that we get to test out the test administration itself. Online testing is new, I would say, for us and most people. The experience itself will be a learning process and will help us to better understand this demand. And whether we go to park or not, this is something that we're going to confront at some point. So this is an important learning experience. And then finally, to see firsthand how students interact with the test and how schools have to deal with the scheduling and the logistics of it are all, again, valuable learning experiences that will help us when we eventually are doing this in a high-stakes environment rather than in a field test environment. So those are some of the reasons why Attleboro answered the call to volunteer to be a field test district. The field test, the park itself has two components. One is called the performance-based assessment, the PBA, and an end-of-year assessment, an EOI. The PBA assessments are given at about the 75% mark in the school year, and the end of year are given in the end of the year. So basically March and then late May. And the PBA assessments are more open-ended. That's where students are asked to write and to do some other answer some other questions that aren't just simple multiple choice type questions. This test is given earlier in the year so that there's a chance to score them because they require human scoring. And then the end of year assessments are very simple multiple choice exams. So they're given late in the year, and they're basically just run through a machine. They don't take time to score the results. We won't see the results right away, but eventually when Park comes online, if it does, that would be quickly done. So both of these things have to be tested because there are different kinds of questions being asked in both of those testing environments. So that's what's being tested this spring. The state asked us, to volunteer to be a part of the field test. We did. They then picked what schools that were a part of it, which tests were being tested, and which we think of Park as being an online test, but as Representative Hurros talked about earlier, there is a paper version. As he expressed, there are grave concerns about the fairness of people who have to take a paper version of a test that was designed as a computer test. I think there's a real equity issue there, but leaving that aside, they're making that test as well. So they have to test out the paper test questions, they have to test out the computer questions, they have to do both the PBAs and the end of year, and they have a span of grades. So the state notified us and said, these are the schools, these are the tests, these are the grades, and that's I've presented to you in chart form. The tests are timed tests. It's not like MCAS, which are timeless. I believe they're planned to be around an hour, but I think you're planned for about a 2-hour testing window because you have to, give the kids the instructions, and they are allowed to do a little bit overtime. So it's not a full day of testing. It's a couple hours out of the day, and in the chart, as you can see, depending on which grade and which school, students will be involved in anywhere from 2 total sessions over the course of the whole year to as many as 5, again, total.
And a session constitutes 2 hours?
Roughly. I mean, it depends on the test. There's the writing test for ELA takes longer than the end of year versus the math.
What's the window generally?
The time window?
Yeah.
It's around 2 hours.
Okay. So no day-long sessions?
It's not a day-long session. It is not. So those are the basics of what's coming. The state has been a little bit behind in delivering on some of its promises about the support they're giving us for this administration. I think this has been a major challenge for Park, for DESE, and it will be a big challenge for the schools involved, especially if you can look at the chart and see, Thatcher and Coelho in particular have a lot to deal with on this. We received this is out of an email we received back in September. We didn't hear much from them until November. We did a conference call in late November in which they promised that we'd be hearing from Pearson, who was the contractor. We'd be hearing from them in December. We didn't hear from them until mid-January. So things are coming slow. We're finally getting a flood of information. We're trying to piece it all together. They've promised that we would be getting some sort of template for communicating with parents about whether, when we identify which exact students are going to be tested, we want to notify parents so that they know that their kids are being tested. I'm assuming that the state will deliver on its promise to help us with that piece. If they don't, we'll come up with our own communication because we certainly want everyone to know ahead of time that their child is involved with this. And the last thing is we had to make a decision back in December about whether or not to exclude the students who are taking the PBA. It was never an option for the end-of-year assessment students. Some students, as you can see from the chart, are only taking the end-of-year assessment. But for students who are taking the PBA, the state offered to exclude their MCAS results
from consideration for both, that they wouldn't get they wouldn't get a student score, and that the school wouldn't have their scores. And we, like most districts, to my knowledge, did not take the state up on that. We thought it was really important that students would have access to their MCAS scores, that the district would be able to see how the district is doing. And not only would it have impacted this year if we had used that exclusion, it also would have caused trouble in future years, because growth data is based on your history of scores, and if you take one score out, then you don't have a like group of peers to be compared to. So for all those reasons, we will be having MCAS. And I should point out that the testing window for Park is after the MCAS testing window. So they sort of mirror each other, but no students will be taking Park before they take MCAS. So they'll do MCAS first, and then they'll do the Park field test.
And just to be clear, that with regard to the students who potentially could have been excluded, those are, because all these tests are being administered in the lower grades, this doesn't affect the graduation requirement competency determination.
The highest grade being tested is 9th grade algebra.
So, although as you said, certainly the student and his or her parents can see that data, it's more for the district's determination as to where the schools are as in their entirety. Is that a fair statement? Or?
I don't know. I mean, I think both parties have a real interest in
Okay.
knowing the student performance.
And Mr. Sheehan, some of the difficulties that Mr. Sawyer has outlined, consistent with what you've heard from other superintendents?
Very much so in this state, not so much from other states.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And it's better or worse than other?
It's far worse here.
Really?
Yes.
We're usually better at everything.
That's what I'm used to hearing.
Right.
And remember, I was part of it for 26 years.
I know.
Right. I think it's very interesting overall when only a year ago, I don't think there was a question with regard to would the children in the state of Massachusetts be taking the Park assessment. Everyone knew they would be. Now all of a sudden this question, whether in fact they're going to continue with this initiative to do an online Park assessment. And just the cooperation we get from the state in the implementation of this first part, I'm so happy that we're doing the field testing, because it gives us an inside track as to what to expect in the absence of any direction from DESE. At the same time, you gotta remember, when Massachusetts is doing this right now, 32 states totally, in fact, and now I believe it's up to 34, will in fact be implementing Park assessment, not just Massachusetts. So Massachusetts is looking at, we used to have MCAS, we know where we rate in the country, what's going to take place. So I think there's some political ramifications to this. I think there are some other questions that need to be answered from the people up above with the commissioner and everybody else. But even more so, I look at Mr. Tyler's expression about when kids are going to take both tests. I'm fearful if we don't give the MCAS, as we discussed at length to make that decision, if we don't give those kids the MCAS prior to the POC, and then they say they're not going to do the POC, well, we have a gap with those kids.
Yeah.
So I don't trust that this is 100% given that POC assessment is going to be here.
Okay.
So I could go either way. I know this, that they're going to be, Massachusetts will then be compared not with the NAEP test, national test, which is about 45 years old.
Mhm.
They'll be compared to 31 other states or plus on a particular test.
Right. Any questions on this topic to Mr. Storrs?
If memory serves, 9th grade normally does not take MCAS, correct?
That's correct.
But I heard you say 9th grade.
Yes,
Does that mean Park is planning on testing 9th graders going forward?
they are.
Absolutely.
All the way up through 11th grade.
Wow. Okay, that's a big change for
Yes.
Massachusetts. As far as the data, I think you and I have already conferred about this, but I think it's important for parents to be aware that they're not going to see the results.
That's right. The data is not going to be tied to students. In fact, the only thing the state is getting from this field test is statewide aggregate data. So on test item 72, 80% of the kids answered A, 10% answered B, so forth and so on.
as a district, will we get aggregate data?
Not for the district.
What a shame.
Statewide only.
We get test administration information and direction and so forth and awareness, but as far as the collected data, student
They
achievement
really
data-
want to emphasize that they are testing the questions, not us,
Right.
This year.
this year.
Other questions with regard to park, the field test? And this is obviously a topic that, again, will be broached again down the road. Okay, Mr. Sir,
Thank you.
hopefully your future presentations will be on the same night where we have major discussions on the pool. Keep the questions short, and you'll be able to go back even faster. All right, our next item is a recap of the school committee orientation program, which is mostly done, although we did have a rescheduling of a briefing that will have to take place this coming Monday. But aside from that, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Scales and Mr. Withers for that presentation.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, we met 4 times already, have pretty much completed the orientation. Our first session was at Peter Thatcher Elementary School. We met with administrators as well as 2 former committee members and 2 former administrators. They kind of told us about their experiences on the committee and in working in the district. They stressed to us the importance of a strong relationship between this committee and between the administration. And then we all kind of had a roundtable discussion where we talked about what we thought the mission of the Attleboro schools is and should be, and what role we as a school committee can play in fulfilling that mission going forward. I think we all felt that was a very fulfilling session, especially having former members there to share their experience. So I know we're all grateful for them for showing up and helping us. Our second session was at Brennan Middle School. We met with the administrators. Superintendent Sheehan spoke about the technology issues and problems in the district. The assistant superintendent spoke about the Human Resources Pilot Project grant as well as other issues. We had a presentation on the special education program, and our business manager spoke about the budget in general, kind of giving us an overview of what we have to look forward to over the next 2 years. Again, a very fulfilling meeting. I think we learned a lot. We had a lot of roundtable discussion to get a better idea of what's going on in the district, and I'd just like to thank the administrators for being present at all these meetings and taking part in what was a lot of fairly lengthy meetings. So thank you.
All right, session 3 was held on the 13th at Willett Elementary School. The committee was briefed by the executive director of the Mass Association for School Committees on the roles and responsibilities of school committees. The presentation was very informative, and they provided us with many examples of different situations we may find ourselves in. Also, walking the halls at Willett was very enjoyable, as they do a wonderful job of showcasing the student work. Session 4 was held here last Saturday in the Apprentice Cafe. Members of the Student Advisory Council made a presentation on their expectations for this committee, including the need to incorporate student voice in decision-making, the need to employ professionalism, and the need to ensure that success is defined in a way that benefits the diverse student body of the school system. Their presentation also included a video that they made, giving students the questions such as, what does Blue Pride mean to you? It was very well done, and it reaffirmed to us that the students here care about their school, their community, and one another. Following the students' presentation, committee members discussed their expectations for the chairman, for the body and individual members, and for their expectations for the administrators. Members then offered their thoughts on what impact they hope this committee has on the school system over the next 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Withers and Mrs. Scales. And I know hearing about it makes you just want to go through the whole thing again. And I'll reiterate the gratitude conveyed by the members to the administrators for coming in and working with us and helping this committee to sort of get our feet underneath us and sort of get used to this role. And we appreciate the time and the commitment that each of you shown, obviously. During the final orientation session, I did circulate a draft of a document that was generated based off of our conversations in the first 3 sessions that we called the basic agreement, outlining the commitment and the expectations the committee has articulated for ourselves, and sort of as a foundation level agreement amongst the committee to keep our focus on the current and future students and their interest. And so I would ask tonight if we could have a vote to endorse that basic agreement so that we can make that available as a public document. So a motion to endorse the Attleboro School Committee 2014-2015 basic agreement.
So moved.
Okay. I'll do a roll call vote for this. Mrs. Zito?
Yes.
Mrs. Singer?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy, yes. Mrs. Scales?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler?
Yes.
Mr. Withers?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Storrs?
Yes.
And again, I would just, we'll make sure that that document is published. And I thank each of you, and Mr. Carr, if you could extend our gratitude to your colleagues for the work that they did as well. I think, as with when we were trying to get our superintendent candidates acclimated to the Attleboro community, the student presentation was the highlight of the process, I think, which is not surprising if you know our students. Okay. Our final agenda item is the assignment of subcommittees, and as I've already communicated to the committee and the administration, I've appointed the following subcommittees for curriculum and instruction: Mrs. Scales, Ms. Singer, Mr. Storrs, and Mr. Withers. Finance, Facilities, and Procurement, Mr. Larson, Ms. Sawyer, Mrs. Scales, and Mrs. Zito. And the Policy Subcommittee, Mr. Larson, Ms. Singer, Mr. Tyler, and Mr. Withers. To the position of School Committee Representative to the Municipal School Building Commission, I've appointed Mr. Tyler, and to serve as the School Committee designee to the Student Advisory Council, I've appointed Ms. Singer. And I'll be serving as a co-designee until the graduation of the class of 2014 in accordance with an agreement with our student representatives. So, and once those subcommittees in place, I'll speak less at the meetings, which I look forward to, and I'm sure most of you do as well. So we'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And this meeting is adjourned.
Orientation policy.
Northeastern Policy Secretary.
Okay.